Now let's go over to the topic of Direct EB5. The EB5 program was created in 1990. I filed my first Direct EB5 case in 1993. I got it approved in 24 hours. Oh boy, when Coca-Cola cost a nickel, wasn't it wonderful? But not too relevant to today because there's no more 24 hours. In fact, you could be lucky if it's 24 months to get your EB5 approved. 24 months, maybe 36 months, 2 to 3 years. Now, there may be expedites, but the problem with the Direct EB5 is how are you supposed to run this business if you don't have a visa, if it's taking 2 to 3 years to process? So you need to have the E2 generally. Well, what if you don't have the right country? I've mentioned, then you acquire that passport. So Joe, look, this is what you do for a living all day. Rather than me talk, I'm sure people are tired of my phony English accent. Discuss this EB5 process. How does this thing work? Give me a little run through of what happens. I call Joe Barnett and I say, Joey, I need an EB5. What happens?
Yep. So EB5 is, like Bernie mentioned, a long-term solution. It many times needs to be put in parallel with a short-term non-immigrant visa solution, which is why we're talking about the E2s as well. EB5, there's two aspects to the initial application where you file. It's called the I-526. You need to demonstrate that the money that you're investing into the United States and into this company was lawfully obtained capital. You need to demonstrate that it's put at risk into a US company that has the ability to create jobs for US workers. You make the investment, you show the money's at risk, then you file the application. The processing times during that application, like Bernie mentioned, it kind of varies. Once that application is approved, if you're outside the United States, you apply for an immigrant visa abroad, or if you're in the United States on an E2 or another non-immigrant visa, you apply to adjust status. Once you get that immigrant visa put into your passport, if you're abroad, you enter the United States, they stamp your passport, welcome to the United States. A week or two later, you get a conditional green card that says you entered on day X and your conditional green card expires on day X plus 2 years. During that 2-year period, you can live wherever you want, work wherever you want, or drink margaritas on the beach if you really want to. Of course, if you're doing Direct EB5, you need to be engaged in the management of the company. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. You have that 2-year period in the United States. At the end of the 2-year period, you file the I-829 to remove the conditions. What are the conditions? Well, one, that you haven't gotten any of your investment funds back yet. You've sustained it at risk. And two, that the jobs have been created. And for Direct EB5, you need to demonstrate that those are W-2 employees, full-time employees within the new commercial enterprise that you invested in, or within that new commercial enterprise's wholly owned subsidiary. And so, like we have, I think Bernie mentioned this beginning, EB5 is a job creation program with an immigration benefit. If you don't create the jobs, you don't get the full benefit. It's investment is not enough.
So, yeah. Joey, let me jump in here and ask you the question. I want to talk about investment amounts. I filed cases in September 2019, and I believe at that point we were filing at 900,000, correct?
That was as of November of 2019.
November 2019. Thanks for correcting me.
Yeah.
So November 2019, we were filing EB5, and there was 900,000 minimum investment, and then 1.8 million. So now my slide says it's 500,000 if you're in a TEA and 1 million outside of a TEA. What happens? How come nothing ever goes down? The prices always go up. How come we went from 900,000 to 500,000? Can you explain that to me, Joey? I don't get it.
The price increase occurred in November of 2019 based on a regulation that was promulgated and finalized by the Trump administration. And then there was a lawsuit that was filed, And last June, a district court struck down that regulation, which had increased the investment amount, because the person who was in charge of DHS at that time was not properly appointed and confirmed as required by the Federal Vacancies Act. And so it has been struck down and vacated as if it were never put into place. And now that minimum investment is back to 500K if it's in a targeted employment area.
So Joe, you have, you're able to predict the future. I know you're able to give me the, tell me who's going to win the Super Bowl. I've heard that you've been talking about the Rams winning the Super Bowl. Most of us in LA are expecting that, but not everybody. Question. If I file an EB5 after we get reauthorization, assuming we get reauthorization, what is your prediction as to what the investment amount is going to be? Today we know it's 500,000 and 1 million. Using your ability to read tea leaves and tell the future, what do you predict the investment amount will be, assuming we get reauthorization?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think we're going to see some level of increase in the price, maybe up to 750K or 850K. I think what we can anticipate is that when Congress reauthorizes the regional center program, part of the reforms that they include will have investment amount increses.
So look, you know, I'm being silly because that's my MO, my way of presenting things. But I don't say I'm a betting man, but I've seen a draft of the bill, and the bottom line is the price is going up. It's going to go back up. They regard this 500,000 as too cheap. So for those of you who are sitting on the fence and you're happy with direct, if you wait for reauthorization, which to be honest, I am recommending to some people, depending on their preference, that they wait. If you do wait, warning, warning, warning. I predict that the minimum investment will go to 700,000 and 850, 700 and 850. So be ready to pay a premium if you listen to Bernie Wolfsdorf and wait for the regional center program. The direct program is real and operating, but I still prefer the regional center program, and I'll be direct. The reason why is that with regional center, you only have to prove indirect jobs, and that's a big deal. Having 10 full-time employees is expensive, but the good news is right now we've got a deal at 500,000. This is likely to go up. The price is definitely going to go up. The price was substantially higher just a year or two ago, and now we're back to the original number, which was set in 1990. This is a 30-year-old number, discounted for inflation. This is really
a deal.
It's a good deal.
Not a bad price for freedom.
It's not a bad price. Well, you use the word freedom. I use the word American dream. I've lived the American dream. I'm an immigrant. And honestly, we've got problems in America for sure. But which country doesn't? And anyway, I'll cut my patriotic stuff, but I still think
yeah, the fact of the matter is that the investment amount now that is available for direct EB5 will likely not last and be there when the regional center program gets reauthorized.
So Joe, let me trick you and go one step further. If I put in 500,000 now, is there a chance that they may require me after I file to put in additional money?
It's a great question and one we get often, and I would argue no. You're eligible at the time of filing, and what the law and the regulations require today is a minimum investment of 500K if you're in a TEA.
That's a very important, it's called the cutting back, K-A-T-I-G-B-A-K, cutting back. They always quote that case against us that you must have meet all the requirements at time of filing. We don't care that you met them 3 days later. We don't care. At the time you submit the application, you have to meet the requirements. So I'm with you, Joe. I think if 500, we go in at 500, we're pretty safe. And the only argument I have now to push direct, only argument is the price. The price is good. The price is right. But interestingly, I have found clients are concerned about having to put another $500,000, or I think if Congress acts, it's going to be somewhere in the middle. I think the old 900 was too high, and we didn't have many customers. And folks, when Patrick starts talking, I'm going to try and answer some of the questions. But in the meantime, we got to get through this. Joe, run through the basic requirements for us again, please.
Yeah, you invest lawfully obtained capital into a U.S. company that's going to create jobs for full-time employees. You show that with a business plan that is created, documenting the types of jobs, when they're going to be created. The business plan, there are certain requirements that must be met to show that it's credible.
But Joe, don't say effectively sitting at 2 or 3 years, you file your case and you get an RFE and they say, show me the jobs have been created. And you're like, well, look at my business plan. It's a reasonable business plan, but they actually want to see jobs.
That's true. What we have been seeing is a lot of requests for evidence saying, okay, you have this business plan. Nothing has, it's been 18, 24 months since you've submitted it. Show me that you're executing the business plan. And if you're not able to show steps towards executing that business plan, they'll say, okay, well, then it's not credible. So we have been working with our clients to make sure that they have some job creation by the time that their I-526 is adjudicated. We can draft a business plan to give a little bit of wiggle room, but really what the government wants to see are that jobs have been created before they even approve the I-526. Whether or not that's what's the law or regulations require, that's what they want to see.
I used to drink coffee, but now I switched to tea. TEA. Sorry, that was a bad pun. Can you, in 20 seconds, switch to TEA? What is this TEA thing? And don't tell me what it's going to be under new rules. I'm not interested in economic zones and all that stuff. What is it today? How do we, because the correct investment amount is not 500, it's $1 million. Let's get this clear. The correct investment amount is $1 million. It is reduced to 500,000 if, finish my sentence.
If the company that you're investing in is creating jobs within a targeted employment area.
Got it.
And what is a targeted employment area? It's a rural area or an area that has high unemployment, 150% of the national average.
And you're going to tell me where these things are, Joe?
They're based on census tract. And so it really, we would work with an economist based on the location of the business where you want to be located and confirm whether or not that will qualify for the lower investment amount. And what you end up getting is a letter from a state or a local municipality, if you're in Texas or some of these other states, and they will confirm that it is an area of high unemployment. That is good evidence that you can submit to USCIS that they're supposed to defer to.
The bottom line, they want to see a current TEA letter as of the time of filing. After filing, we don't really care what happens, but as of the time of filing, you have to be in a TEA, and that's your job to help us get that and to determine. So don't buy your business until you have retained
Bernie,
Joey.
an important note, like Joey alluded to, Texas municipality letter definitely takes a lot longer with judges, from what I understand, having to prove it. Florida has been a breeze. Like we get the letter in like 24 hours.
Yeah, it's absolutely based on the state. Some states are a lot easier to work with than others. Florida is a great one. California is starting to get a little bit more easy as well. So it's definitely a state-by-state thing. Now, of course, you can also do your own analysis and submit your own analysis to USCIS. It's just that sort of under their policy, they're supposed to defer to a state determination. So it's better evidence to submit.
So look, Joe, you've mentioned the word at risk. The bottom line is every business person needs to understand what's at risk. But if there's a guaranteed investment, you're out. So whenever people say, look, I need a guarantee, I'm going to get my money back, you cannot do that. So Joe, talk a little bit about equity, because the bottom line is that with Direct, it's going to be an equity structure. With the regional center, you've potentially got a loan structure. What's the difference, and what is the difference from a risk perspective, sir?
Sure. So the way that it works is you're required to make an equity investment into a new commercial enterprise. In Direct EB5, the jobs must be within that new commercial enterprise or within a wholly owned subsidiary, meaning equity only. In a regional center context, USCIS has allowed the use of a loan model where you make an equity investment into your new commercial enterprise that pools the money with other EB5 investors, and then you provide a loan to a developer who uses that money to build the building and create the jobs.
So the bottom line is that if it's a loan, the loan will mature after 5 or 6 years, maybe with 1 or 2 extensions, but the debt instrument equity does not mature, and you've got to focus more on an exit strategy. We've kind of
Correct.
gone into that. We've spoken a little bit about lawful source of funds. I'm going to start flying through some of this stuff. Go back and read the PowerPoint because I want to leave some time for Patrick, and I don't like going too long. Creation of the job. Joe, so if I just hire 10, this is tricky. So we do recommend E-Verify to prove job creation, legal, lawful employees, but please be aware you can only count citizens, no family members, LPRs, permanent residents, asylees, and refugees. You cannot count DACA kids and TPS. Even though they're lawfully authorized to work, this L2 spouse or E2 spouse cannot be counted amongst the 10. So we need to see 10 US citizens. I like to monitor this very carefully, and no independent contractors. You've spoken already about the importance of business plans. If you're going to do EB5, you need to be familiar with this. What's in a business plan, everything. Characteristics of direct investment. Joe, why does it have to be 100% parent? Why can't you just do a 99% subsidiary and put the jobs in there?
Because the regulation says wholly owned subsidiary, and that means 100%. So you got to follow what the reg says.
So
I will say though, just to kind of we just went through the I-9 thing real quick. It's really important that you have these I-9 compliance because this is one of the documents that they look at when you're proving job creation. And you know, it's not enough just to have an I-9 though. It's necessary, but not sufficient.
So the I-9 is the form you complete on day 1 of hiring a foreign national and verify within 3 days of hire. But Joe, some people don't like to submit I-9s. They prefer other records, and they will only submit an I-9 upon request because it raises the question where these people authorize. And every single I-9 I see has mistakes on it, which means they can be fined for those mistakes. So get your I-9s in order, Joe. We need to do an I-9 webinar because it's so important, particularly for corporate employers. But thank you for reminding us.
The thing that I just wanted to mention is that you have to demonstrate that these positions are 35 hours a week. That is the key. Yeah, exactly. Full-time positions. So it's also having payroll records and things like that. Your W-2s, they're going to be looking at how much money an individual makes in a year. And if you're working 35 hours a week for a certain period of time and you're not paying the minimum wage, for example, then that's another issue that USCIS will raise up.
Because it's not lawful. It makes total sense.
Yep.
Job creation, again, significant detail outlined in the business plan. We went through this 100% characteristics of direct, and that was the point you just made, Joe, how important it is at the removal. There is nothing worse than an 829 denial. If your 526 gets denied, well, fine, you didn't get into the US and you didn't get your green card. But if you're already here, you've got your green card, your 829, you do have a right to present your case again in front of an immigration judge, but 829 denial is horrible. So you need to focus on what Joe's saying with regard to the I-9 forms. Some of the advantages of EB5, geographic diversity, pool direct. Joe, let me throw that one at you, Patrick. What's your view on pool direct investment?
I think it's a great fit for the right type of investor. If you don't want to really be on top of your investment and you want to give the responsibilities to another party to like be following up with the investment and kind of giving up a lot of your control, can be a great option. If you're looking to have more control in the business and you want to have a say on what's going on day to day in the business, then it's probably not a good fit, as you might not have those responsibilities. Also, if you want to combine the E2 and EB5, I don't know of a pooled direct option that's possible for that combination.
Joe, what's your preference?
For what?
Pool direct investment. Do you like pool direct investment? Do you like self-directed investment? What's your preference?
I think historically more folks have done the direct EB5 on their own. Pooled direct has sort of grown significantly since the regional center lapse. I think it is still viable. The key here is showing that you're still engaged in the management of the new commercial enterprise as was required by USCIS, either through policy formulation or some sort of managerial responsibility. And so that is incredibly important for direct pooled, is making sure that the operating agreement and other corporate structures are in place to show that you can meet that for USCIS compliance.
Thank you. Troubled business. Look, I'm not going to get into troubled business. I mean, you want to purchase troubled business, you have to show that there's been a 20% loss in the 12 or 24 months period immediately preceding filing. That's one of the exceptions in job creation, but it's a very tricky. Buying a bad business or a business that has had losses is terribly dangerous. There's also a new variation, which is the hybrid. We've spoken about management quite considerably. Joe, you've got to talk about exit strategies.
Well, this is how are you going to get your money back at the end of the process, right? Your money must be at risk throughout EB5, throughout your sustainment period, which is 2 years of conditional green card status. But the question is this is not a donation. You worked hard to earn your money and it's an investment and there should be a return of your investment. So you have to look into the business plan and say, hey, how are you going to be paying me back? And what's nice about the regional center loan model is that there is usually a term in which you can get your money repaid, and potentially it is a secured loan. And so if something were to happen, there'd be collateral that you can foreclose on. That is not available with direct EB5. And it comes down to the success of the business and making sure that, go ahead.
That's why I kind of still prefer regional center, but we don't have regional center. And we haven't had since the program expired in June, and it's been a long dry spell. So that's why we are focusing again on direct. Patrick, can you talk briefly about exit strategies? And I know you'll go into it a little bit more in some of your projects, but what are the two basic ways that people can exit, recognizing that these are equity investments and exit?
I don't like when it's a preferred return or anything guaranteed. Because we've been doing this now 7 years. We'd worked with some franchisors that did offer that. But when there's an issue, it's usually not honored. So I think it's disingenuous. And I really don't like when there's a guaranteed or preferred return. It should be, if the business does well, you do well, you get nice dividends. If the business doesn't do well, you're going to have to inject more capital or close the business.
I really like that answer, and thanks for being direct with our audience, because people have to understand the word guarantee doesn't really fit, in my opinion, in this arena.
Who's guaranteeing it? Like, are they giving a personal guarantee and the guy's worth 10 mil? Or is it like a corporate guarantee and the balance sheet has 200K, but he's given the guarantee to like 10 people?
So just be very careful and recognize that realistically, there's risk, and you need to do your due diligence because it's not that easy out there.
To better answer your question though, exit strategy, if it's a business that has recurring revenue, generally you can sell that at a multiple of sales. So if it's a property management business and you're doing 300K every year and the clients are sticky, right now is a hot market. You could probably sell that business for 450K.
And
it's
that is, of
trade
course,
at some multiple, and you can sell it to the franchisor, another franchisee, another immigrant investor, an American investor. There's a fluid market, especially when it's a recurring revenue business. If it's like a restaurant, they're not trading as high a multiple, but you should be able to find a buyer if the business is making money.
And that would provide a potential exit strategy for investors. But we need to make sure that the buyer is also going to cooperate with us in processing the visa, meaning providing all the necessary documents. This new buyer needs to know that there may be continuing obligations. But even though we're running out of time, I'm sticking on exit strategies for a little while because I want the audience to understand how critical this is to success, because your happy client, if you're a lawyer, is going to be unhappy when they find that.
And we look, it's like if you needed to unwind, like if you traded a stock and you bought a stock and you wanted to sell it tomorrow, what would be the loss? Like a home, it's going to be 10% hit, probably a stock less than a 1%. If you buy a business and want to sell it tomorrow, what's the hit? Is it 20%, 30%? If you want to sell the business in 3 years, how much capital should you be getting back? It's all pretty easy to get. There's a lot of data now, and you should be able to get those answers pretty quickly.
And
But
the other
you
thing
wanna
I want to
do
say
the
here is
analysis
that,
up front is the key point.
yeah,
So,
and in a pool direct, you may have a limited ability to force a sale, right? So it's that exit strategy
well,
may
let's
be
just
out
be
of,
real. You don't have ability to force a sale.
yeah, so you
know,
exactly.
the managers are going to keep that. They're not going to give that to you. So, Joe, we spoke a little bit about proving a new commercial enterprise if it's an existing business with the 40% expansion rules. We spoke about TEAs. You've spoken about a lot of this is repetitious. Joe, I want you to address the last point, though. No material change to the JCE allowed. What is that, Greek? The bottom line is that until the person has a green card or landed, you cannot have material change. So if you wanted to change the nature of the business from a hamburger stand to an elderly care business, can you do that?
Not before the CPR status is obtained for
Conditional permanent resident status.
Exactly.
Right. No abbreviations.
Exactly.
Right.
There can be immaterial changes to the JCE. Maybe your business plan said you're going to be opening in December and now you're opening in June the next year. I don't think that's material. But certainly there are some things that are just not allowed, and that USCIS would say, oh no, you're required to refile.
Yeah. So I think that's important. You can't just flip. I mean, in business, people do, but unfortunately, they don't want any material changes. So we've gone through most of this. I do need to briefly talk about a change of E2 to EB5. So the E2 requirements are different. If you're going to try and get the lower amount, you need to make sure that you're in a TEA at the time you made your investment. So here's the critical point. If you are going to try and convert your E2 to an EB5, you need to think EB5 at the time you do your E2. You need to start your EB5 planning at the same time. So great, you go out and retain Joey to do an E2, you go out and retain Patrick to find you a franchise, but that business has to be in the correct location if you want to go in the lower investment amount. That is so important. It has to be structured correctly. The source of funds to do an E2, you don't really have to go too deep on a source of funds. For an EB5, you do have to do a forensic report on source of funds and path of funds. So much more detailed focus on the EB5. So if you're going to design the house to live in when you're old, you've got to take into consideration, don't put in any stairs now, because it's going to be hard to go up and down if you're going to live in that house when you get old. So when you're doing the E2, even though going up and down stairs may not be an issue, think about it from an EB5 point of view.